And this is Akeem Oh saying, you're watching the Cloud Machine podcast here on your favorite streaming service.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Cloud Machine podcast. My name is Mat Landry, and in this 9th episode, I'm back with Akeem Oh. Throughout this podcast, we discuss Akeem's love for vinyl, DJing, curating, the Beatles, dreams, and projects. We also play a little game called Guess That. Thanks for listening. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Cloud Machine podcast. For those who are new to the podcast, Cloud Machine is about the music industry and its stakeholders, meaning everyone that works in it, lives it, loves it, surrounds it. Our goal is to shine a light on different roles, peoples, and realities of the music industry that are often forgotten or taken for granted. Whether you're someone that's dreaming about making a move in the industry, have some songs recorded, and don't know what to do with them, or just a listener that wants to learn more, you're at the right place. This week, I have the immense pleasure of welcoming back one of my best friends and collaborators to the podcast once again for part 2 from last month's podcast. Akeem Oh is an artist, multi-instrumentalist, producer, creator, historian, vinyl curator, and DJ. Having been based out of Ottawa for the over 10 years, Akeem has garnered a respect in the English and French music industries as an artist, visionary, and facilitator of all things music and live experiences. I really believe that Akeem is like a library or a database for music history knowledge, and you'll really get to know that side of him during this episode of the Cloud Machine podcast. For more information and to get in touch with Akeem, you can get in contact with him at his website, akeemo.com. That's AKEEMOH.com, or on socials at Akeem Oh Music. Without further ado, please welcome again Akeem Oh to the Cloud Machine podcast.
Hey, it is great to be back. Hey, settle down.
Okay.
Hey, come on.
How are you?
I'm great. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great
Yeah.
It's great to be back in Toronto, man.
Thank you for coming by once again. I thought we were deserving of the second episode because I don't know, it was great last time, and just we didn't get to talk about all of the sides of Akeem Oh. So thanks for being back. I wanted to start the episode by asking you the same kind of question, but that we ask all the time, but sort of in a different light. Your best experience or your favorite experience more as a DJ, actually.
Okay.
So for those who don't know, Akeem is a DJ. We have a duo group together, a vinyl DJ drum duo called Wax as well. But please take us through your favorite experience as a DJ.
Yeah.
Not to influence your answer there, but please.
I mean, it kind of is. I don't know. There's a few that come to mind. You know, like I think the early Wax days, which were like in your apartment, on Wellesley Street, that was iconic. We would host parties at your place, and then we would DJ the night, and all your pals would come, and it was all creative people, and like they really, really enjoyed those nights,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one of those nights when the cops show up, because obviously we're making some noise,
Oh man,
But they saw our elaborate, setup, and they were like, "Oh, like, no one's smoking weed."
Right.
So they just kind of let us continue.
Yes.
Like it was great because even then we already had, all the equipment and everything. Like, I brought a bunch of lights from Ottawa to do that.
The whole vinyl setup to DJ, the drums in the apartment. Yeah, and this was a small 1-bedroom apartment, but we had 40, 50 people in there.
Yeah.
That was definitely a highlight for myself.
Yeah, like that's definitely a highlight. When we played at the 27 Club in Ottawa after our gig at the National Arts Center. We were so tired from the first gig, but we went out and we did this show, and there's like maybe 200 people there. It was wild. It was such a good night, like solid vibes. Like, if there's like one night I'd love to like relive just for the fun of it last year, it would have been that night for sure. Night. It was great.
Do you have any great memories about some of the nights that you've done as a wedding DJ or as a private event DJ, or are those kind of limited?
I mean, there's always some great moments, like I remember this one time I had to DJ a wedding outside of the city, and I was given an address, and I drove an hour and a half out of Ottawa.
Right.
But the wrong way.
Oh, no.
And the wedding was about to begin in 2 hours. So I literally sped that day. I was zooming. I get to the venue, it's outside, and it's raining. But the organizers are like, oh no, but it's still going to be outside. And I had rented all this equipment, so I didn't want to damage it. And then 5 minutes before the wedding, the sun comes out. And so I got all the equipment out of my car. I put it up as quick as I could, and the wedding began.
Wow.
And it was wild.
Right.
But it's funny because I was so stressed out about that wedding.
Mm-hmm.
But then the dance itself was just the reception and everything was great. It was just such a good time.
Right.
And then I often see the couple in the French community because they're both very, very involved in the French community in Ontario, and they always come up and they're like, when you DJ'd our wedding, that was that made everything better. And they were talking about how the aunts and the uncles and the family are still talking about how good it was.
Right.
So it was a really good time, and I want to live more kind of DJ experiences like that, because I've also DJ'd weddings where the bride and groom end up in a fist fight at the end of the night because they're way too drunk.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've seen all kinds of things, I've DJ'd for over 15 years, and man, I've seen some things.
All to say, book DJ Akeem Oh. Is that your official DJ name as well, or DJ Akeem, or?
I mean, it's funny because I started when I was 12 or 13, and at the time I was DJ Akizzle. Which is ridiculous. It's so embarrassing. Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, it was embarrassing.
Akizzle.
Yeah.
Let's go. Okay.
My early business cards have DJ Akizzle's DJ service. And it's just me with wearing Aeropostale or whatever, and just working the knob of a 18 channel mixer.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was ridiculous,
Wow.
But I still have some of those somewhere.
Dang.
But those are
it'll be at the
again.
Museum for sure.
Yes.
One day.
Yeah. Le Musée du Akeem Oh.
The next question here I have for you is sort of related to that, because you worked at the Record Center for so long in Ottawa. Shout out Record Center.
Yes.
In Ottawa. What's the greatest thing that you ever saw at the Record Center, or that was brought into the Record Center? And I'll kind of push it forward to a job that you have now at Cicada Sound. What's the greatest thing that you've ever seen in one of those two shops?
Yeah. Well, the Record Center, there was all kinds of really interesting things going on, and sometimes even just I don't know, it's the everyday people were great, and then the kind of public figures that came in were great. Jim Cuddy from Blue Rodeo would come.
Right.
Jagmeet Singh from the NDP would come and chill. And what was great was that we just would have these interactions as normal human beings. It was very oh yeah, it doesn't matter what your status is, you're always welcome to come in and just share your love for music. But yeah, the Record Center, I found so many autographed records in the most random of places.
Right.
One of the last autographed records I found at the Record Center, I found one, it was Roy Orbison with all his band, and it was Hal Blaine, which is who's an iconic drummer who played on on Pet Sounds and so many iconic
studio drummer, crazy. Yeah.
So finding that, I found some AC/DC records that were signed.
Okay. Wow.
I've held some signed George Harrison records. There's honestly so many great things that happened at my time at the Record Center. And then at Cicada, there's a lot of musicians that come in, members of Arcade Fire, Death from Above.
Right.
But the coolest thing that happened for me was on my very first day at Cicada Sound. a Jupiter 6 comes in.
Okay.
And they're quite rare, and it was in mint condition. And one of the owners that day was like, "Oh, do you want to bring it home?" And I was like, "What? This is like an $8,000 synth." He's like, "Yeah, you want to bring it home?
Yeah.
Like, you want to try it out?" And I was like, "No, it's okay. Like, I'll just try it out in the store, you know."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you didn't end up bringing it home? Okay.
No. Oh my God.
But you did end up bringing some other things home, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Some of the perks
Yeah.
of working in a sort of music shop, I guess, in general. And specifically, do you want to talk about Cicada Sound for just a couple seconds?
Yeah, so it's like a new shop in Ottawa that's selling a lot of modular boutique instruments and pedals, kind of like serving the, I don't know, just like the different types of music that might not be represented in, you know, like a Long and McQuaid or like a chain shop,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So we're bringing, you know, our expertise on modular instruments, vintage synths, and like we're bringing Hofner in, which I'm really, really excited about. And
you heard it here first, actually.
Yeah. It's an exclusive. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a great shop, and it's nice because it's all people that are just really passionate about it, and also anyone can come in and try an instrument out.
Right.
You know, like that's the type of place it is. And for me, like community oriented and forward thinking type of businesses is something I love, because like I've always had a bit of that mindset as well.
Right.
So yeah, it's been great, and it's been nice to just share my love and knowledge with people.
Yeah, I'm super excited to come in the store next time in Ottawa. So let's get that sorted.
Let's go.
The next thing I want to ask you about, and this could be a long-winded question here, but your passion for vinyl. Mm-hmm. This is one of your, first loves, I guess. Please walk us through like your love of vinyl and like your vinyl collection specifically, and I'll ask you more questions later on that, but just like a general overview on what you think about vinyl and your collection.
Yeah, it's interesting because I guess it just started by my parents just having that. Like we had like a game room at home, like a rec room where like there's like a pool table and like a bunch of like our toys growing up, and there was this setup, you know, like for a turntable and an 8-track player. So I remember hearing Thriller as a kid. Like that's my earliest music memory, hearing Thriller.
Right.
And I still remember how it sounded coming out of those speakers to this day. And it's funny because when I listen to that record, I really want to replicate that sound.
Right.
Because like it's just such an important sound to me, you know? So that's how it started. And then being a fan of the Beatles, you know, and being a fan of a lot of like 60s and 70s music,
right,
I really wanted to get it. Like I wanted to play it in the same way that like my parents would have played it at the time, you know, and it was on records. So I started to kind of look for records. I mean, Mattawa's not really the place for records, you know, but on my 7th or 8th birthday, my parents gave me a turntable, and it was like a really nice Panasonic turntable. And I was given a few Beatle records from a guy. His name is John Whalen.
Shout out John Whalen.
Hey.
Yes.
Yeah, he was a great guy.
Yeah.
He gave me a bunch of records, and that's how it kind of started. And then it was like going on family trips and finding out there were record shops. And then just like that started my complete addiction to records, you know.
What's your collection like now? I know, like I know, but please let's talk about that for a bit. You basically have a living room full of records. Do you want to talk about that for a bit? Was that an important thing for you to have like a space in your home for those? Physically, it was a need for sure for the amount of records that you have, but just like a listening space, was that important?
Yeah, definitely. I think that like for me, since it's like it's almost an experience every time I listen to a record. I really wanted to have a dedicated space where I could really just sit down and take that music in. You know, I feel like with streaming, you know, it's often when you're on the go, you know, or when you're doing something else. Whereas like, you know, to really enjoy a record, you have to be present.
Right.
You know, like, because you're going to have to go up and flip the record, you know? So you're paying more attention to the whole piece of work instead of just like, oh, you know, the single, the hit song,
right?
You know, the trending song.
Right. It's a process in itself.
Yeah.
That's why it's like, it's an art in itself. Just the consumption of it is art because you have to interact with it. I always thought that was great. Do you have certain prized possessions in your collection? I know this is really one of the things I wanted to talk about. A couple prized possessions, maybe top 3.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I can bring it to 3. You know?
Yeah.
But like, I mean, like I have a RAM, like a Paul McCartney RAM promo.
Yeah.
Maybe 200 of those in the world. They were sent out to college radio stations, and it's basically like a bunch of clips of every song, and then like Paul and Linda just like doing random chatter and stupid stuff.
Wow.
So yeah, that's a nice one, and it's like a white, like a plain white cover, and like it comes with like, you know, just like papers that would have been given to like radio stations and stuff at the time,
right?
Just to it's just like lots of like little musical cues. I have a John Lennon record where there's only they say there's 10 of these in the world.
Oh my gosh.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
And I bought that in Ottawa from a shop thinking that, like, at first I thought, oh yeah, like they made colored vinyl of this specific John Lennon record. And then I get home and I just cannot find any real info on it. And I did a bit of digging, and it's a guy that worked for Geffen Records,
right,
who had done private presses. So he did 5 in one color and 5 in the other color, and he gave it out to friends, and then he got fired for doing that. And then I have one of those at home, which is crazy.
Wild.
You know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then other than that, like I have like, you know, like an MGMT test pressing for their 3rd record.
Right.
Lovage Music to Make Love to Your Lady by.
Right.
Which is like a side project from Dan the Automator, under the name Nathaniel Merriweather. And it's like one of the first projects that like Damon Albarn did, you know, leaving Blur.
Right.
Kid Koala's first project. Like it's one of those records that like it took like almost 25 years for that record to be reissued, and like there's like constant legal battles and stuff, so it couldn't get re-released. But
right.
The last time I saw Kid Koala, we spoke for a little bit, and he was like, oh yeah, like by the way, like Dan started to buy back all the rights to his Arc records, so it finally got reissued last year.
Nice.
But it's cool because I have the original.
The original,
you know,
yeah.
The real deal,
Dang.
you know, at a time where like they weren't making vinyl. So
right.
Yeah.
I feel the passion when you talk about vinyl, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you back, because we didn't necessarily get to talk about it last time. The next thing is still on vinyl, is your first vinyl and then your last vinyl. Do you remember what your first vinyl was as a kid?
I mean, I always just like to say that it was the Michael Jackson record.
Right,
like,
the Thriller record. Yeah.
For the longest time, my parents thought that it was like a record that was worth a lot of money because it's Michael Jackson.
Right.
So they kept it under their bed for years and years and years. And I remember wanting to take it, you know, and they were always like, no, it's worth money, you know, but like,
right.
Thriller is one of the best-selling records of all time.
Yeah.
They literally sold like multiple millions in the 80s, and like so many of them are still around.
Yes.
Like they're not worth, you know, as much as people like to say they are.
It's not the under their bed kind of record. That's funny. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I do have it now.
Right.
Merci.
Hey.
And
yes.
It's just like it's completely scratched up.
Right.
But it's like, it's in my collection. It's like part of my identity.
Yeah, well loved.
Yeah, well loved is right.
Yeah. And do you have a last record?
Yeah, last record. I mean, I'm trying to think of what the last record was. Yeah,
From our conversation, I feel like there hasn't been that much vinyl purchasing lately.
Yeah, it's been I've been trying to kind of cool it on records for a bit.
Right.
Just because I have so many other interests right now too, and I have so much time to get into buying more records. You know? I bought like a Mitski record not long ago, like a Laurel Hell, which I think is a great record, one of the great records from last year. I bought a Stones record, Beggar's Banquet, which is like
there you go.
a classic, you know. Pleased to meet you. So just like random things I find. You know, I bought a Fleetwood Mac record. Which is rare for me because I'm not huge on Fleetwood Mac. Yeah. But they have this one record, and I forget the name of it now, but it's a man that's standing there, and he's kind of like sucking in his belly, and there's like a kid that's kind of like around him. Right. And it's one of the last records that the original Fleetwood Mac made, with some of like the, well-known members kind of like starting out in the band, So there's a few tracks on there that I really, really enjoy. So I saw it for like $8, and I was like, hey,
there you go. When I think about Akeem, I think about the Beatles, basically. Mm-hmm. I know we could sort of have many, many, many episodes on just the Beatles in itself, probably year per year, and even more than that. Yep. Which could be a podcast idea. And it's probably already one out there. I guess my first question for this topic is, what do you love about the Beatles? Huge question.
Yeah, that is a huge question. Honestly, I still don't understand why I love the Beatles as much as I do. It is an addiction for me, honestly. Just like, it is the biggest love I have in my life, and that surpasses records. I think it's just that it was so timeless for me. Everything they've done, even Don't Pass Me By.
Shout out Ringo.
We love you, Ringo. It's all very fresh to me. Right. Like I listen to like a lot of stuff from the 60s, and some of it sounds dated. Whereas like the Beatles stuff, even like their early recordings, for me, they don't sound dated. There's like so much energy and love that was put in that like it kind of just like transcends the whole like, oh, it's old and it's old recording techniques, and you know. So I think it's just there's a timeless quality to it that is definitely missing in music, and like even a timeless quality that maybe started to go missing in the 70s, after the whole kind of decade of Beatles dominance, you know?
How have the Beatles left a mark on you? From multiple different ways, I guess, from in your personal life, but also on your artistry.
Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, like loving the Beatles like that is a blessing and a curse. Yeah. Because as a musician, I just want to make stuff that's like really timeless. Right. And sometimes that might stop me from just like taking the time to do something for myself at home that's like maybe just current and not timeless. Right. So sometimes I tend to fall into these, I don't know, where I'm always kind of comparing. But it's interesting. McCartney will release a new record, and people will say, oh, like it's not as good as Ram or Chaos and Creation, blah, blah, blah. Right. But it's funny because his stuff still has a huge impact on what I do. Right. Like sometimes I will look back at some stuff I've done in recent years and be like, that's a modern McCartney move. Right. Like
that's Egypt Station.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny
Yeah.
because like he has a song For You,
Yeah, right, yeah.
which was like a lot of people were just like, oh, that's Paul being horny,
Right.
But it's funny because like the way the vocals are done on that track, I've done that type of effect on some songs where
Right.
like I'll take songs and just pitch it up and use that as an instrument,
Right,
like
right.
I do that quite often, and
Right.
it's an Egypt Station trick.
Right.
It's like it's a modern producer trick.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. They've just had such a huge mark in so many ways, and I think that as someone of color, it's also great to look back on them and be like, oh, like they were super influenced by black groups, by Stax Records, by Motown and Chess Records, like so many labels that like were pushing forward black artists, and they weren't afraid to talk about it, even
Right.
in conservative US when they were going to do tours. Sometimes they would have promoters be like, oh, like this is a segregated show, by the way. And they would be like, no, it's not.
Right.
Like they made sure to have it in their contract to say that there's no such thing as segregation at our shows.
Right.
Yeah, they were definitely, forward thinking, and yeah, it's just played such a huge role in pretty much everything I do.
Yeah. I have a note here, Motown on the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to talk about specifically that? I know you just mentioned it, but Motown and the Beatles, and I mean it is a common it's a common place to talk about the role that black music has had I guess on the Beatles music. Did you want to just a couple more words on that specifically
Sure.
for Motown or
Yeah. I mean, the Beatles really did get that kind of like for example, the song like Getting Better, where it's like da 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 da, and kind of like chill on that 4/4.
Right.
They got that from Motown.
Right.
Like Motown was doing that,
Mm-hmm.
in like 63, 64, and by 66, 67 when they started to do kind of like more of like the psychedelic pop thing.
Right.
It was from Motown, and they weren't afraid to say it, that like
Yeah.
like Got to Get You Into My Life.
Yeah.
Like that kind of like the bass hitting on each beat type of thing. Was definitely like a typical Motown thing, and
Right.
it became like a Beatles signature in the mid 60s.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it ever had I'm honestly, I'm just asking you this, I don't even know, but do you think that the Motown sort of business aspects, the Berry Gordy, all those things, even like in-house production, do you think it had an effect on the Beatles? Even when we're talking about 66, 67, in the face of them going to Abbey Road to kind of bunker down, sort of like what the Motown production sort of factory in Detroit was. Like, do you think it had an effect there? I don't know.
like,
I've
yeah.
always like thought of that, I guess.
Yeah, like I think a little bit, but at the time it was pretty routine for the studios to just like have their engineers.
Yeah.
Whereas like now you can bring, as long as your engineer knows what he's doing, you can bring him to any studio and work with him.
Yeah.
Some artists will literally work with one engineer and then a producer,
Right.
or a producer who engineers.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that like part of their timeless timeless sound was also because of all the engineers at Abbey Road that wanted to continue to push the envelope.
Right.
I mean, with the gear they had at Abbey Road, a lot of it was kind of dated because they had 2-track and 4-track, and like 8-track only came in 69 when they were doing Abbey Road. But like 8-track, they had 8-track in like 1965, 66 in the States,
Right.
So it's, they were always like a little bit late on certain things, but they took what they had, they took the limitations and did so much more than what other artists were doing with 8 tracks. You
Right.
know, the limitations were what allowed for them to evolve as studio musicians and basically producers, because like by 67, you know, they were coming in with their ideas, you know, like, I mean, Paul was bringing in a lot of ideas. So yeah, the limitations like help them kind of go somewhere that like,
Right.
you know, other places or
Yeah.
other studios weren't able to do because they had,
They had to.
They had to,
right? It's creating in constraint or whatever that term is. I forget now.
Yeah.
I'm blaming the French again. But yeah, I agree. Like creating in limitations and putting limitations on yourself is also a method of creativity. Back then, I guess they didn't have the option of going farther. So it was sort of like not necessarily a self-imposed constraint, but no, I completely agree with you there. I mean, they completely changed the game, especially when it gets to 66, 67, with all those recording techniques and Abbey Road and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have a favorite Beatle?
I mean, I'm a huge Paul fan,
Yeah.
you know, and like, I feel like a lot of people love to hate on Paul, but like, man, he's the real innovator, you know, the forward thinker. And I think that because of, you know, the whole, you know, John Lennon myth, you know, that like Paul's work has often been put aside. But yeah, Paul was a driving force. He was the one that did bring, you know, the tape loops. He was going to raves, you know, like, he was the one going to all of these things, and Lennon eventually followed and carved his own path, and, you know, met Yoko Ono, who was also an artist in her own right. You know?
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
You know,
Honestly, a lot of that kind of leadership and a lot of those like just that energy comes out as well in the documentary that came out a couple of years ago. To me, it was very present. It was sort of obvious the leadership that he had in that group in that documentary, because the band was sort of like in different pieces. They were like broken a lot.
Yeah.
And John was going through his addiction stuff. George was like completely out of the band at one point of that documentary. Ringo was just chilling most of the time, but he didn't have the influence that Paul had.
Yeah.
It seemed like, and just like for him to go through that process and us being able to see that now, I mean, it's so great.
because people will be quick to say that Ringo was the real glue, because, you know, the other members of the Beatles, you know, they all loved Ringo. They all stayed close with Ringo.
Yeah.
But like, Paul was the one that would make the calls, you know, like there's these famous interviews where, you know, John and Ringo will be like chilling at home, and they would hear the telephone and they knew exactly who it was, you know, because it was Paul, and he was like, okay, we've got a session, like, let's get together, boys. You know? Yeah. So yeah, man. And it would have been interesting to see where they would have went next, because I mean, they all released these brilliant records, you know, and even Ringo released some brilliant records, you know, like, I mean, for me, Beaucoup of Blues and the Ringo record, you know, there's so many great tracks on there, and, you know, George with All Things Must Pass.
Yeah, George.
Yeah, like
great.
Lennon, you know, Plastic Ono Band, and
Yeah.
then Paul, like both McCartney and Ram, you know, there's timeless classics on there, and yeah, they could have definitely done another record, but at the same time, it's also okay that they did their own thing. you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think that, like, especially after, you know, that amount of time, you know, like John, Paul, and George knew each other for 13 years. You know, they were young when they met, so like, it was like they spent their formative years together. So I'm sure that it was difficult for them to split, but, you know, it's also kind of part of life. They had to
it's
do their
okay.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that the Beatles would have been less mythical if they would have lasted longer than they did?
Like, I think that, like, their influence would still be felt in the industry, but who knows, you know, like, for me, like, a lot of people will be quick to, you know, to put the Beatles and the Stones in the same box, you know,
Right.
but, like, for me, the Beatles are always going to be a step above because, you know, when the Stones started, John and Paul were writing some of their songs.
Right.
You know, and, you know, I feel like every record the Beatles released was part of an era, you know? And, like, sometimes it was like they were going through 2 eras in 1 year because they were releasing 2 records a year.
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that, the scene would definitely be different now if they, like, it would be a tiny bit different if they would have continued because maybe they would have brought more ideas that, you know, that
they eventually researched by themselves or like thought out by themselves. I totally agree. I have a note here as well, the influence of the Beatles on the industry of today. Are there parts of the industry today now that you see and you're like, oh, that's a Beatles move?
I mean, the whole, like, you know, merchandising thing was very new when the Beatles, you know, when they came to America in 1964. They were some of the first bands to have merchandising deals.
Right.
You know, so, like, they had all kinds of things. Like, they had Beatle panties and like, bras, you know, like, that's... Bruh, you know? I got one. No, I'm kidding. Come on. Nah, I'm not like that. Come on. But, yeah, they were one of the first bands to do that type of thing.
Yeah.
They did so many firsts, you know, and, like, honestly, like, I feel like I could do a whole episode of just, like, Beatle firsts. You know?
Right. That's like, I mean, I guess the whole, what you're saying is basically that the whole industry is influenced by the Beatles of then.
Yeah. But, like, at the same time, like, you could go as far as saying that, like, the Beatles were, well, McCartney was, you know, the Beatles invented the indie label thing with Apple Records,
right?
You know, because indie labels weren't really a thing. Like, even though they were distributed by Capitol and everything, and then outside of the US and Canada, Apple was a label. But, like, Paul recording an album at home, like, that was uncommon. You know, like, the Beach Boys had done it with a few records in the mid-'60s, but, like, they sold poorly. You know, like, they didn't really have the impact at that moment. They do have an impact now, like those... like the 3 lo-fi records they did. But, like, McCartney, like, I was reading today, actually, because I've been reading a McCartney book.
Yes. Yeah.
And, McCartney, like, the first McCartney was one of the top sellers of 1970.
Right.
And then it's funny because when I remember listening to Ram, or maybe just giving it a bit more of a real listen, and, like, some of that stuff, like, you know, bands like Of Montreal and MGMT, they've borrowed so much from that era of McCartney.
Right.
You know, like, the kind of, like, modern psychedelic thing, often comes from, you know, the Beatles and the Zombies, the Beach Boys, and McCartney.
Yeah.
You know, so there's definitely still a huge... they've definitely left their mark on music.
Right.
Yeah.
Both in the music, but also in the business, because you're saying all these firsts. That's a great thought on that. Let's move a little bit away from the Beatles for just a minute, because we're gonna get back to it. I wanted to shine a light on the DJing thing again. You don't know what I have on my page, so just to tell y'all, Akeem doesn't necessarily know because we didn't necessarily prep for this interview. This podcast. Excuse me. Tips and tricks on DJing.
Yeah,
I know it's very vast ask, and you haven't necessarily thought about it. Tips and tricks on DJing, but also maybe even curating a playlist as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's just, like, read the room.
Right.
You know, like, really just read the room. Because, like, it's like sometimes you'll go out to, I don't know, you'll go to an event and the DJ's just playing whatever he wants to play. You know, he'll play like, you know, like, and you're trying to have a conversation with someone. Well, like, I guess the DJ didn't read the room. Like, if he would have read the room, he would have seen that, like, oh, these people are talking. Let's put some chill beats or something, you know? And then you start to build up, you know, as people start to mingle and kind of move and, like, you know, then you start to kind of pick it up. And once you see that, like, people are starting to get excited about the dance floor, just, like, put on a classic.
Right.
And that will get people to come out. It's like, I don't know, you put, like, I Got a Feeling or something. You put, like, you know, like a throwback from the 2000s, and suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, like, I remember where I was when this first played.
Right.
You know? And then they automatically feel like either they want to dance or they have to dance.
Right.
You know? And then you keep them on the floor. You put some hits, and then if you see there's, like, a lot of couples and they're getting all gross and coupley, then, like, throw in a slow.
Right.
You know? So, yeah, it's a bit of just, like, reading the room. I think that's really important.
Yeah, you're number one.
Mm-hmm.
I recently, shout out Masterclass. Honestly, shout out Questlove again. I know the last time you were here, and basically in every episode I talk about Questlove. But he has a masterclass on DJing and curating, and he has so many other DJing tips. And like in this like 10-15 episode kind of DJ masterclass is actually insane. One of the things that I remember specifically from those things is that the time always matters, in the sense like the time of the evening always matters, in the sense that when it approaches, let's say midnight or something, or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, you want to play your hits at those times of the night, as in at the half hour, at that 1 hour mark, at those whatever marks, basically the more important times of the night, because people will be like, oh, we'll leave at 1, we'll leave at 1:30, we'll leave at 2 o'clock. But if they don't check their phone or their watch or whatever at that time because a hit is playing, they'll be like, okay, well, next time I check, okay, well, we'll leave in like another 5 minutes, and then another hit plays. Yeah. So like there's this whole strategy to it that I didn't think about before I saw that Questlove masterclass. And for those who know, I'm a huge Questlove fan, so I got to watch that masterclass, even if I'm not that even if I'm not that much of a DJ, except in high school. Shout out to everybody that was there at the DJ Mat Landry DJ high school dances.
I've done that as well, man.
Yeah.
I think like for me, and I guess for Wax as well.
Yeah.
It's always been about like almost having little sets. So like at one point in the night, it's nice to have kind of like laid back chill, and some people will continue dancing, others will get a drink, talk a little bit, and then suddenly it's like back to the hits, you know, like, and then people are back on the floor having a good time. And it's nice to also just throw in things that they might not know. Yeah. You know, you kind of mix it in a way where like, I don't know, mix it into, you know, like you have one track that someone knows or the people know, another track that's, you know, kind of like a deep cut or something, like, I don't know, like some Polo Pan or something. Right. And then mix that into like Sexy Back or something. You know?
This
and
massive,
then, like,
massive banger.
Yeah, because you're like, okay, this is chill. Like, this is chill, laid back. I might not understand the words, but like it's percussive, it's nice. And then you're going like this, and then suddenly, burr, and then the arms come out, and you're like, you just like mix it up a little bit. Get people dancing, and I feel like when you're DJing, it's not like when you're an artist and you're doing something for yourself and expressing yourself. I mean, there is a side to DJing that is yourself, you know, like you definitely want to put your love out there for the music, but it's really about the people there. You know, you want to create an experience for them. And I think for Wax, that's what it's been, where like we have fun on stage, we do all kinds of other projects, and this is like all our projects are fun, but this is like another fun project where we can connect with people in another way. Yeah, you know,
totally. It was So for those who don't know, wax, WHACKS, is double entendre in wax, meaning vinyl, and wax, meaning drum hits, drum wax. So we are a vinyl and drum DJ duo based Ottawa, Toronto, kind of a mix of both. And yeah, we do like full nights of drumming and DJing. We've done like 4-hour nights where I'm drumming the whole time and my hands literally are bleeding like the Ringo Starr. It's a Ringo Starr reference for those who know. And it's always been a great time interacting with the crowd. And especially, I don't know how you feel about this, but adding a drummer to a DJ set also adds like this whole other element where it's more like interactive and people sort of like know the natural kind of sounds. And I add my own rhythm and beats on top of some songs that we already know and kind of switch it up for the people. So I've had a great time doing that thing, man. I hope we get to do it again soon.
I hope so too. And it's cool because, you know, we're also doing these events in places where you normally wouldn't really have an event.
Right.
Like we've done, you know, apartments, we've done cafes, we've done clubs. The real difference, because I like when we did the Halloween thing, we did one night at the 27 Club and one night at Art House in Ottawa, which is a cafe. And like a lot of people went to both. And the first night, they liked it, you know, but they connected even more on the second night because we weren't on a stage. We were on the same level as them. We were close, and people could see you play.
Right. Yeah.
You know, people saw that you were into it, and it's not just the arms and the hands. It's like also like your legs moving, and you know, like they were really part of the process.
Right.
You know, which is like that's how it should be. You know, if you're curating a night for people, you want them to be part of the process.
Right.
You know, that's what makes it all worthwhile.
And we are back with Akeem Oh on the Cloud Machine podcast.
It's great to be here.
Man, we got I've prepared a game for you here. The game is called Guess That. For those who were here, I mean, throughout the podcast, you know, this game, Guess That, is basically guess that artist, guess that song, guess that lyric. It can be a bunch of different things. But for you specifically, I have a Guess That Beatles edition.
Ooh, the pressure is on.
The pressure is on.
It's like when you put that little cowboy music.
It is high noon.
Hey.
Basically, I have just a bunch of different questions. It's mostly all individuals. So it's in the sense that it's guess the Beatle. Basically.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Pete Best. No.
Pete Best.
Hey.
Hey, yo. Question 1. Who was the first grandfather out of the Beatles?
I would like to say, like, I feel like it's not an obvious one. No, I think it's because I can't fail on the first question, you know.
No pressure.
Yeah,
no pressure.
I think it's Ringo.
It is Ringo.
Yeah,
hey.
that's what I thought.
Yes.
I think it's either Zach or Jason.
It's Tatya Jane.
No, but I mean his kid that had him.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, I was like, okay, Tatya Jane.
But that's what I thought. Yeah, because Paul became a grandfather in 1998 or 9, because it was like a few months after Linda had passed away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because there's a famous McCartney picture where he's on the couch relaxing and the baby's just like.
Right. Yes.
his
Yeah.
chest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Taken by Mary McCartney.
there you go.
Yeah. And it was like kind of like a sentimental thing because Mary McCartney, you know, continued in the footsteps of her mother
Right.
as a photographer.
Yeah.
So it was like continuing on the, you know, the
There you
journey.
go.
Yeah.
Well, you got the first question right.
Yes, I did.
Yes.
This might be an easy one for you, but
Yeah.
who says "Oh fucking hell" during "Hey Jude"?
Oh, it's John.
Apparently not.
No, it's John.
It's John. They might be, they might be wrong here because I trust you more than this
it's John.
random site.
Yeah, because like the oh, fucking hell. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's John.
Yeah, it's John.
What does
okay.
it say?
It says Paul, but he's singing, so
No.
it doesn't make sense.
Nah.
Yeah. Okay.
Nah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Who appeared in the Monty Python's Life of Brian comedy?
That was George Harrison.
Hey.
Go ahead. There you go. Yeah. Because George Harrison helped fund because the company that was funding the movie the day before was like, we're gonna pull the funding.
Right.
So Eric Idle, who's like a well-known Monty Python legend, called his friend George, and George was like, yeah. And one of like the funny things that Eric Idle says is how it was like the most expensive. It was the most expensive movie ticket. You know,
there you go.
For George.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah,
That's great.
but George was great, man. You know, like he was someone that was like not really about material possessions, but at the same time he had a castle with 120 rooms. You know,
There you go.
so I love him.
And we're back again, Akeem Oh.
He's here.
He is here. Ottawa legend. I wanted to ask you, going into a different topic now, your dream projects and your future projects as well. Do you want to start with your future projects? What do you got going on right now?
What do I have going on right now? I mean, I've been recording for quite a long time, honestly. Yeah. But there will be new music in 2023.
Hey, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Well, no, not necessarily, but because you've been promoting.
I've been promoting it for 10 years. Yeah. There's new songs that I'm really excited about. I'm writing some really cool stuff as well.
Right.
And yeah, I'm just honestly very excited to see where it will go. I feel like I will reach new heights. I feel like with every move I've made, there's always like, it's a step forward. You know, like that's how I see it. Like no matter what it does, it's a step forward in my journey, and I'm happy with that.
Totally.
Yeah.
What about dream projects? So
yeah,
I mean, that's a big question.
Yeah.
And honestly, you don't know this yet, but the last topic of the conversation is another game, which is a whole other thing that we'll talk about soon. Mm-hmm. But what are some of your dream projects? And it's a very like wide kind of a thing, but either recording or live or like stuff like that.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things that like come up to in my mind.
Yeah.
Like I would love to write some instrumental music.
Okay. Whoa.
And send that off to a rapper and have the rapper chop it up and make whatever they want to make with it. I think that it would just be so cool because I think that sampling is really fun. Yeah. So, yeah, if a rapper ever decides like, hey, I'd love to take a track and just like mess with it, like I think it'd be great. And like if it comes out, it comes out. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I think that there is a certain like thrill to just creating to create. Yeah. So that would be fun. I want to score. I'd love to do some scoring. I think one of my favorite, just because it's so like not a film score in some way. So the film Her. Yes. Yeah, with Joaquin Phoenix and Arcade Fire's music. Yeah. I think that, yeah, it's kind of like an unconventional way of scoring a film. Mm-hmm. And just like the fact that sometimes it's just a drone or like, kind of like raw sounds going through reverb to kind of create an intense moment. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to do that with like an indie film. Like an indie film and do that would be so great.
You've done some theater stuff?
Yeah, I've done some theater stuff. I've done a bit of film stuff too for like Lifetime and like Hallmark and stuff. Yeah. Which is fun, but it would be great to do like a full feature or like have an Akeem Oh song in a film. Yeah. Honestly, as long as I can continue to express myself in different ways, like that's all I want in the end. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any dream projects for live?
Live, I mean, yeah, there are a few that come to mind. I'd love to, and this has been in my mind for like, like at least 20 years. Yeah. It's like, I started thinking about this when I was a kid. So I guess there'd be two. So I would love to do like a show with an orchestra.
Right.
Like take my songs, break them down, and have an orchestra play it. And I'm just in the middle with a condenser mic.
Right.
And I'm just closing my eyes and just singing, you know, like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
would be great. And like, I don't know. That's the type of thing I'd love to do at the NEC. You
Right.
know, like kind of like almost like a homecoming, you know, like
Right.
a homecoming in Ottawa for me would be to play at the NEC
With
later on with like the NEC orchestra.
right.
Like that would just be a real thrill for me. And I think that I would just be very emotional.
Yeah.
And then I would love to play in Mattawa. You know, I have not played in Mattawa for 11 or 12 years. And
Yeah.
even then, I felt like I wasn't really doing what I wanted to do. I was signed to a label that did not give a shit about my personality and what I wanted. So I'd love to go home as Akeem Oh and play the summer festival.
There you go.
And just like literally be a diva in front of everyone who's ever just like bullied me and has not believed in me. That would be something really special.
Hey, yo. For those who have been following the Clown Machine podcast for a while, you know that you might have seen this game before. This is called the Producer's Game. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give Akeem 6 different categories, and he'll answer them. And this game is basically your ideal or your dream album. So the 6 categories are the artist, as in who's going to put this record out. And there could be features, stuff like that. So there's artist, who's going to produce the album, who are going to be the musicians on the album, at which studio, in which city. So to be specific here, you can have a studio in a different city.
Damn.
And in what year? What's the era? So again, who's going to put this album out? Who's going to be producing it? Who are the musicians on the record? The studio, the city, and the era. Now, it can be multiple artists, multiple producers, multiple musicians, whatever. But I'll give you time, and we'll come back to it.
All right.
You're done?
Yeah.
Hey, all right.
Akeem Oh.
There you go.
Ça sent bien.
Okay. So we're back after giving Akeem a little bit of time here with the Producer's Game. Please present what you've got for us.
So in 1969, at the end of 1969, Paul McCartney and his family went to his Scotland, like his Mull of Kintyre home.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like very remote. And so the company that he was part of because of the Beatles, Apple, received a telegram from Jimi Hendrix inviting him to come and record an album with him and Miles Davis in New York, which is wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he never got it because he put aside Apple completely at that point. So he just learned about it later. And that telegram actually surfaced like maybe 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So for me, it'd be McCartney, Hendrix, and Miles Davis.
Right.
And at CBS Studios in New York, where like a lot of like the iconic CBS records were done. So like Miles Davis, Kind of Blue was recorded there.
Right.
All of like the Simon and Garfunkel records, Bob Dylan records, and it's actually where Ram was recorded.
Yeah.
like
Okay.
McCartney's Ram.
Yeah.
So yeah, in 1969.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to put a producer because I think that it would have been interesting, you know, because you have McCartney and Davis who are perfectionists.
Yeah.
And then Hendrix who's easygoing.
Right.
So like, I just wonder what kind of dynamic would have been, you know, because McCartney could have also, like, he could also be the artist that was just jamming around and having a good time,
Right.
you know, and sometimes there was like brilliance in that type of stuff too. But he was also an artist who kind of knew what he was looking for,
Right.
and still knows what he's looking for, you know.
Yeah.
So it could be interesting to see what could have happened there. I wouldn't assign a producer, because if George Martin would have been there, I feel like it would have been, okay, we're doing a proper record type of thing.
Right.
So leaving these iconic and experimental musicians together to do their own thing, like, it could have been like another Bitches Brew,
Right.
or it could have been another McCartney.
Yeah.
It who knows what it could
Or
have
an
been.
experiment
Mhm.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
Do you have any ideas for other musicians that would be on board for that? Or would you leave it to them kind of thing to decide?
I mean, when it comes to like a drummer, like, I don't think I would go with Keith Moon, because Keith Moon, like, there'd be a lot of like excess, I find.
Right.
Like, I would want, like, a drummer to just kind of like drum along,
Right.
and that might be Hal Blaine.
Right.
Either
That's a
Hal
great
Blaine
pick. Yeah.
or what's his name, Jim Keltner.
Right.
Which
yeah.
would be
of course. Yeah.
because Jim Keltner is just like, he's listening and he's just like do 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 do, and just playing, and then do 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 do, just like he's kind of just listening and just like adding stuff in between. You know?
Some toms.
Some toms. I knew that was coming.
There you go. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of who I would see, and like, I don't know, like, if there was any kind of like strings or something to be added, I would go with the arranger that worked famously with Serge Gainsbourg.
Okay.
Who kind of just would add strings, kind of just like in between random passages of music.
Right.
Like he did that on like Histoire de Mélodie Nelson, where like you'll have a song kind of playing and then there's just a random swell and the orchestra's gone for a while.
Right.
So I think, having an arranger like that kind of just like listen and kind of instinctively know where to put those things would be great. Whereas I feel like, George Martin, it would have been very pretty.
Right.
So.
And you'd go CBS in New York.
Yes.
So both still the same studio, still
Yeah.
the same city.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And like, I mean, at that point they also had, a 16 channel, so like they would have enough to do, and they had really nice pianos there and all kinds of things. Like, I think that like it's an iconic studio that has an iconic sound.
Right.
And it would have been also just like a departure for McCartney.
Yeah.
Doing that there instead, and for Hendrix as well too, I would think.
I'd like to thank Akeem Oh for being on the 9th episode of the Cloud Machine podcast. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah,
it's
man.
been a pleasure, and it's great to, because we work together quite often.
Yeah,
and
we text
like,
every day.
Yeah, we randomly talk about little things, and I don't know, like influences and stuff, but we never really sit down and like, I don't know, just like go even deeper on that. So it was great, man.
Yeah, it was so insightful to this time around, even to talk about like your passion for vinyl, for the Beatles, and just like even that the producer's game was so fun just to hear your take on that. Yeah, man. Thanks again for coming. Thank you for those who are listening, watching us. It's been really great to see the reaction, see the comments, see the interaction. Like I just said just 2 seconds ago, the French is coming out again, but just seeing the people that really care for this podcast and that send me messages and stuff. So please continue to do so. We are here to answer your questions, see your comments,
And this is Akeem Oh saying, you're watching the Cloud Machine podcast here on your favorite streaming service.
Thanks again, everybody. Stay safe. We'll see you next week.